let's talk about Talladega. Of course, that's the big one. Speaking about the big one, 28 cars collected, the largest big one in the modern era. And one of the big things I think we saw a little bit of a big headache that occurred with the damaged vehicle policy after the big one. Because we saw drivers like Chase Briscoe, Chase Elliott, they stay in their cars. They're instructed to even block the latch so nobody could put down the window net, stay in the car, try to get a tow. They got towed back along with Harrison Burton, other drivers trying to do that. John Hunter Nemechek trying to get going, making burnouts in the back. And all because they just know if they step out of the car, put the window net down, they're done for the day. I feel this mess has gotten really out of hand, Ben. From Watkins Glen, where it was Ryan Blaney, that first lap, okay, you seriously couldn't drive the car back. You were just damaged. That seemed straightforward, but just very unfortunate. A few weeks later, Josh Berry at Kansas, he got spun around in the crash. Very little damage, but he was done for because he couldn't get going with the flat tires. And they said, well, you were in the crash, so you're done for the day. 1 week later, we have this mess where Chase Briscoe was getting towed facing the wrong way. Back bumper up in the air. I just can't believe this. Do you have a better understanding of this damaged vehicle policy, or is this just becoming a bit of a mess?
I don't, Joe. I've never understood this policy. I don't know why it exists. I think it is the most counterintuitive, asinine policy that we have in NASCAR today. And you know how I feel about certain other rules in this sport that have come into effect here in the last 20 years. Hello, playoffs. Hello, NASCAR overtime. Hello, stage racing. Hello, NASCAR charters, which are back in the news again because of the lawsuit going on with 2311 and Front Row. But I at least understand the rationale behind all of those. This is one where I don't even understand the thought process behind it. I've just heard part of Elton Sawyer's media availability and him talking about how we don't want to put good cars out of the race. We don't want to, create any sort of confusion with the situation here. But that's all that we've gotten ever since this system was introduced, this policy was introduced here. I remember when it was just 5 minutes. Now it's fortunately a little bit longer than that. But I think if I had to think of a rationale for it, it would be this idea that if your car is so damaged in a crash that you have to take it back to the garage in order to repair it, there's no sense in you coming back out there on track. I disagree with that, but I think this rule that has been created now with this policy is completely counterintuitive, because if the goal was to prevent rushed repair jobs being done as quickly as possible in the garage to go out and log as many laps as you can, well, now you've coupled that with the fact that you have to remain on pit road and you have limited resources and limited tools in your garage stall or in your pit stall rather than your garage spot in the garage there. You have limited resources and you have limited time. You only have however many minutes it is to get your repair job done. And then you have to go out there and try to putter around fast enough to make a minimum speed. If anything, it just creates an even bigger problem than we had with guys coming back out of the garage. And since we're at Talladega today, Joe, I remember the spring race here in 2009 when, everybody remembers the finish with Brad Keselowski and Carl Everts and everything. But if I recall correctly, I believe that was the race where there was a wreck very early on, I think lap 8 or lap 10 or so, very early in the race, took out a bunch of cars. And Clint Bowyer was on this DNF-free streak, running at the finish streak that dated back, I think, like 2.5 years. It was up to something like 70 or 80 races. And he got caught up in that wreck. And he ended up having his crew in the garage for the entire 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it was, for the remainder of the race. They were going at that car, trying to repair it and get it to the point where he could come back out and just log a couple of laps at the end of the race, which he did, and be credited with running at the finish. And I love that. That's a never give up attitude. It makes it may not make a difference to some fans, but we talk all the time about major playoff implications, 1 point above the cut line or below the cut line. You just never know when these points are going to make a difference. And this time of year, more than ever, every point matters. Every position matters on track. And so for these drivers to be told, you can't even let them take the window net down because the window net possesses some sort of magical power that puts you out of the race, like if they take it down, it's just absolutely asinine to me. I don't understand why this is still a rule, because NASCAR apparently can't even enforce it with their own. At least they're consistent on being inconsistent. What do we talk about all the time? Right? Consistently inconsistent. Chalk up another point for them in that column here with the DVP. I don't understand it at all. And even Bob Pockrass, I think, in interviewing Josh Berry in the bullpen after he was taken out, even Bob said, I hope they change the rule next year because it's tough for us to keep track of as journalists, and clearly the drivers and crew chiefs feel the same way. So again, it's never a rule I've liked. It's a rule that I've never fully understood, and certainly this year more than ever with the next gen car and all the issues that car has gone through in the almost 3 years that we've had it introduced now. I think it's only just further accelerated the problems and highlighted the flaws even more with the DVP. And if you ask me, we don't need to reform the policy. We don't need to revise the policy. We need to abolish the policy, and I hope that they do that in 2025.
Something needs to be done where we don't have this again, because the teams were frustrated. I could tell you, I know there's fans that were frustrated. It's like red flags lifted, but we still have 5 or 6 cars with drivers waiting for a tow. And then we all have this confusion of what's going on. The broadcasters didn't have a clear idea what was going on. And it was just so funny because how Elton Sawyer said this rule is meant to, not prevent good cars from being out of the race. Well, that's what seems to be what I've been doing the most. Ryan Blaney, they could have probably gotten to the pits, fix a part. Maybe they had to go to the garage area to fix the steering, come back out. I bet no more than 10 laps down and complete a Watkins Glen. Josh Berry at Kansas, he just needed 4 fresh tires, maybe some tape here and there, get going. But you look at Chase Elliott's car, it was like, you were clearly in the crash. You did not just spin and get 4 flat tires. You got 4 flat tires. You got stuck in the grass, and you got all this damage to where you were not a factor at all. So I'm just sort of at a loss of this rule because, like you said, I believe it was 2017 it was introduced, and that's where we also have a lot more of these playoff focus, every single point. What's wrong with the idea of, okay, you're going to have a car coming to pit road, you're going to be working on it throughout the day. A team goes back to the garage area, comes back. I would support the idea of you go to the garage area and you have one attempt to come out, meet a minimum speed, simplify it, but this is just getting a little bit too ridiculous. I mean, even just following on the media side, you have a separate window for the damaged vehicle clock. You hoping that they meet the minimum speed. I just don't understand how this has gotten to the point where NASCAR, I feel, has lost control of how they're enforcing this rule, because today I think was just a mess. I know we still would have gotten overtime, but I don't think we would have gotten to the full 195 laps. We probably saved 2 or 3 laps if we didn't have to wait for tows for 5 cars out there.
Yeah, Joe, and to your point as well about the points and the results that I just pulled up here from that Talladega race, I just want to make sure I get everything right here. But Twitter, if you're on Twitter, you'll get this reference. This isn't Formula One. That all blew up a couple of years ago with teams running the same sponsor on multiple cars and everything. But I think in this situation, I think we can say this isn't Formula One, because in Formula One, only the top half of the field gets points. So if you spin out into the gravel and you lose 2 laps, even if your car has no damage, there's really no point in you staying out there, right? In fact, you probably want to retire the car because you don't want to waste miles on your engine and your parts and everything. You want to save those resources. In NASCAR, every position is 1 point, right? Every point matters. Every position matters. I just pulled up the results from the 2009 Aaron's 499 here. Mark Martin, Jamie McMurray, Scott Riggs, David Gilliland, they were all in that crash. I guess it happened on lap 7, like I was mentioning. So they were all listed as six laps complete with an accident as a reason for DNF. So Clint Boyer is listed as 8 laps complete, but he's running at the finish. So not only does he keep that streak going, if he was running behind Gilliland or Riggs at the time, I don't know off the top of my head if he made any positions up from that, but maybe that's at the time 3 or 6 points that he would have made up, and who knows if that makes a difference come race 26 for the chase for the Cup cutoff. I remember Larry McReynolds joking in the booth about how, AJ Allmendinger and Casey Kane, Allmendinger was, this looks like 31 laps ahead of Kane at the time, so Kane was just trying to teach Allmendinger how the 2-car draft was working, because AJ was still only in his 3rd full-time season and everything, and they were just going out to log laps to gain AJ some experience. Great, good for him. But then the battle between Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick was a battle for position, even though those guys were 50-plus laps down, because they had the same amount of time spent in the garage area and came back out onto the track around roughly the same laps. They were actually fighting for a few points there. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe the average fan doesn't care about that. But I feel like in an era where we put so much emphasis on Who's 1 point above the cut line? We've got the announcer screaming in the booth. Look at this is major playoff implications here. So-and-so is 1 point to the good or 2 points outside where he needs to be. These are the kind of battles that we would be all over if we didn't have the damaged vehicle policy, if we still had the ability to make higher quality repairs in the garage area and send these guys back out to gain 2 or 3 spots, to gain whatever points they could have a shot at gaining, and that could potentially make a difference for their championship. You just never know. So it's an incredibly frustrating rule to me. And like I said, I think there's no better way to revise the system and get rid of this controversy than just getting rid of the rule altogether. Joe, I remember before we came onto the air, we were talking about Mark Martin's car and that famous image of his hood completely torn off, his front bumper completely torn off. It looks like he's driving a modified and he's got the number 6 that's just taped or drawn on the side of his car. Like, I miss those days. I wish we could get back to that, but we're never going to get back to that if we still have a DVP.
Yeah, you can't get to it with the DVP. And I get the idea of maybe NASCAR saying, hey, we don't want a car to go out there, cost 3 or 4 cautions because of debris falling. We'll just make a rule that you have as much time as you want to fix the car, whatever you need to do. But if you go out there and a part drops and you cause a caution, maybe 3 strikes or whatever, something like that, where you don't have drivers and teams begging, we just need a tow. We don't have to look at it. We just need a tow. Because this was just really was not a fun moment of the race where we're just waiting for tows and the tow truck drivers. And it's not fun for the tow truck teams, all those people's crews. They're being told, hey, you need to get a tow. Drivers are telling them no, preventing them from doing anything. It was just a mess.